but the most valuable ship may be the hospital ship Comfort.
The investigation into who caused all this continues to point toward Osama bin Laden, and there's no doubt the U.S. will retaliate against whoever is responsible, as the Secretary of Defense made clear in an address to the troops.
The task of vanquishing these terrible enemies and in protecting the American people and the cause of human freedom will fall to you, the men and women in the Department of Defense.
The aircraft carrier Enterprise has been turned around and sent back to the Persian Gulf, giving the U.S. 2 carrier battle groups in the region. It's clear the Bush administration is planning for an all-out military campaign against terrorism.
I think anyone who thinks it's easy is wrong. I think that it will require a sustained and broadly based effort.
The European allies today invoked the clause of the NATO treaty, which states that an attack against one is an attack against all. The more allies the U.S. gathers up, the more military options it has.
We're building a strong coalition to go after these perpetrators, but more broadly, to go after terrorism wherever we find it in the world.
Osama bin Laden is believed to be hiding out in Afghanistan, which is why U.S. officials have begun talks with Pakistan, which shares a long border with Afghanistan. Dan?
David Martin at the Pentagon. In Afghanistan today, Osama bin Laden's Taliban protectors insisted again, but offered no evidence, that bin Laden had nothing to do with the attacks. At the same time, the Taliban made what could be interpreted as a threat, suggesting that U.S. military action that causes what they call suffering in Afghanistan might lead to more suicide attacks. While officials hold out no hope for finding survivors in the Pentagon attack, a massive effort is still underway here in New York. Workers are braving dust, danger, and more unstable buildings, trying to find thousands of missing people in the Trade Center rubble. CBS's Byron Pitts is at the scene tonight. Byron?
Well, Dan, here at Ground Zero, there has now been a shift in the mood and the wind. In the past half hour, the wind has turned north. That means the plumes of smoke over the disaster site that you see behind me are now headed in our direction. That gas is filled with dangerous gases and fibers. And for that reason, authorities have recommended that we wear these respirators for our own safety. Also, a few minutes ago, a firefighter came out and told us all that they no longer hear those tapping sounds coming from the debris. No more cell phone calls. No more radio messages from police officers and firefighters buried in the debris. Not a good sign on what has already been a very difficult day. Today, in the long shadow of Lady Liberty, as Air Force fighter jets patrol the skies over Manhattan, volunteers by the thousands sifted through meadow and misery.
One of the officers came in and said they found a man at 6 in the morning and they had to cut his legs to get him out.
All reminders freedom in America has never been free.
I'm doing this because this is America, this is New York, and these people need people down there right now. I know if I was in there, they'd be in there trying to dig me out.
I was at Oklahoma City bombing the Murray building. This is like 20 of them all in one.
Rescuer and police officer Dan McDonough says he isn't simply looking for survivors or bodies. He, like so many others, is still looking for friends.
We're missing our whole company.
New York's fire chief, a senior chaplain, and head of the search and rescue team, all killed when a building collapsed. More than 200 fellow firefighters missing. Close to 30 New York City police officers unaccounted for. And there, beneath 50 feet of twisted steel and crumpled concrete, beneath what were once the tallest towers in Manhattan, rest the remains of countless victims and the whispers of survivors still alive.
We were taking out someone on a stretcher.
They were alive.
And as he came down the line, I saw that his eyes were open and he was talking.
How good did that feel?
I'm almost ready to cry once again.
But there is not a single chance the living here will outnumber the dead.
The numbers that we're working on are in the thousands. Obviously, we hope that's not the case.
There are men and women lined up here who haven't slept much in the past 36 hours, running on adrenaline and running out of time. 8:48 a.m. Tuesday, that moment in time that changed lives and took lives.
Horrible, horrible. The whole building just collapsed on us.
Let me get you into Stuyvesant High School.
Nightmares. Armageddon right here.
I'm okay. I'm okay.
It collapsed. The top floors collapsed down.
There was like a sonic boom and a firestorm above my head.
Kathy Capsuto ran from the World Trade Center with her daughters in her arms.
What do you tell your children after living through something like that?
You thank God that you're alive. And my kids know that their lives will never be the same again.
Never the same, but still New Yorkers tried. Blocks from the bombing, a father played ball with his son.
We're trying to make the kids adjust as much as possible without making them as afraid as the adults are.
That firefighter who came out and spoke with us a few minutes ago said that he, too, now is afraid. In the past hour, 3 more buildings collapsed, we've been told, around the disaster site. When that happened, the rescue workers were pulled out. That firefighter told us the longer he's unable to do his job, the less likely it becomes they will find more survivors. Dan, many people will pray tonight that firefighter is wrong.
Byron Pitts. The word came late today from Wall Street, only blocks from the lower Manhattan disaster site. The stock markets will be closed again tomorrow and possibly the rest of this week. CBS's business correspondent Anthony Mason tells us what this may mean. Anthony?
Dan, the bond market will reopen tomorrow, but concerned about the damage to infrastructure, much of Wall Street will not go back to business. The stock markets will remain closed for a 3rd straight day because, as the head of the SEC, Harvey Pitt, put it, we didn't want to promise something we couldn't deliver.
Drowned in debris, Wall Street was a deserted corridor again today. The head of the New York Stock Exchange could promise only that markets
will resume operations no later than Monday.
Dick Grasso said Wall Street still had concerns about the soundness of structures, access to buildings, and power supply.
The conduits that sit beneath the streets of lower Manhattan have been subjected to the equivalent of several mini earthquakes when those 2 towers came down.
Many major financial firms had their offices damaged or destroyed in the attack, but the damage to physical capital was only part of the story.
I worry a little bit more about the human capital, the expertise that was probably lost. You know, we can rebuild a building and install computer screens, but to train the kind of people who were probably lost there yesterday, that will take some time.
The investment firm Morgan Stanley had 3,500 employees in the World Trade Center. Today, on its Times Square ticker, instead of stock quotes, the company ran employee helpline numbers. CEO Philip Purcell said this morning the vast majority were safe.
It is not a good story, but we think it's going to be much less bad than it appeared during the day yesterday.
But in a broadcast to his employees, he appeared to choke up.
And we're going to be fine.
But will the U.S. economy be fine? World markets have been highly volatile in the aftermath of the attack, amid concerns about the country that has been the engine of the global economy.
I think there's a lot of caution amongst investors around the world now as they try to understand just how much the US public, how much that engine of growth could have been knocked off its track.
One encouraging sign, the European markets rebounded today, and the finance ministers and central bankers of the Group of 7 nations issued a joint statement vowing the global economy will not be disrupted. Dan?
Anthony, with all of the damage to the buildings and this scene down in lower Manhattan, how can these companies reopen for business by even Monday?
One of the remarkable things is almost all of these major companies have entire duplicate systems, sometimes as far away as Virginia, across the river in New Jersey. There are secondary trading floors just sitting empty, waiting for a crisis. They're just moving people to those places. All of your financial records, whichever company may have it, has a duplicate set somewhere else in the country. They can retrieve that information.
Anthony Mason, thanks. For the insurance industry, claims from the terror attack on the World Trade Center could reach a near-record $15 billion. That would make it second only to the $20 billion insurance bill from 1992's Hurricane Andrew. Joining us now from Washington, the Majority Leader of the United States Senate, Democrat Tom Daschle of South Dakota. Mr. Leader, thank you for coming in tonight.
You're welcome, Dan.
True or untrue that your hope and the hope of your Republican counterparts is that you can pass a $20 billion appropriations bill to handle some of the cost of what's happening now by late tomorrow?
Well, Dan, I think it's premature to come to any conclusions about what the amount or how quickly the passage, but we certainly want to act as expeditiously as we can. We've been in close consultation with the White House and with our colleagues in the House of Representatives, and we'll do whatever it takes to be as helpful and as cooperative as possible.
What is the effect of this on our economy? We pull back what we call in television the wide shot. Yes, we're very much concerned about the families of victims and the search for what may remain of the living, but at some point we have to say, what's happening with our economy? Is this enough to tip us over into recession?
Well, I think your story just now reflects the tremendous devastation and the concern for the economy. We want to do all that we can to help stabilize it through policy and through our public pronunciations. But clearly we know we're in some very difficult times. We know that there is a good deal of uncertainty, whether we open the markets on Monday or sometime this week. We know that we've got our work cut out for us, and we also know that we have a responsibility to try to put as much confidence back into the economy and into the markets as we can.
As for the investigation into who is responsible for what's been happening, you've been briefed. What do you hear? What can you tell us?
Well, there's little that we can tell you beyond what has already been reported. We do know that the full force of all of our investigative agencies, all of our intelligence agencies are now being applied. We recognize that there is a good deal of work that needs to be done. We also recognize that there's a lot we probably won't know for some time to come, that we've got to collectively and very carefully put together the pieces so we have the best understanding of what the circumstances are that we could hope to have.
And a retaliation of some kind is likely to happen sooner as opposed to later, larger as opposed to smaller?
Well, I don't know that we want to put a timeline on it or a size on it. We know that we're going to do all that will be required to punish the perpetrators, to bring to justice those responsible, to retaliate wherever it is possible for us to do so with the confidence that we're retaliating in the right way. But clearly this is going to take additional fact-gathering, additional intelligence, and far more effort to try to put a plan in place prior to the time we commit to that plan.
In Congress, is there generally satisfaction with our intelligence operations, despite the fact that there was no warning of these attacks?
Well, I'd say there is a general level of satisfaction. Clearly, these acts of terror cannot be predicted with any certainty. I think the intelligence gathering services of the federal government have done a good job. We know now, given the threat, given the circumstances, given what we now recognize as a new era, we're going to have to do a lot more. And we want to be supportive of efforts to do more as we look to what resources they may need.
Mr. Leader, let's turn to what is now the transportation emergency. What's your information on when the airlines will be back to anywhere near normal?
Well, I don't know when we'll be near normal. We are going to restart all of at least the commercial airline traffic tomorrow morning. That doesn't mean that things will be back the way they were even on Monday. We are going to go through a lot more security. We're going to have much more of a cautionary approach to the way in which our airlines are scheduled. But clearly the effort will begin tomorrow. There will be bumps. There will be a lot of glitches. We know that this isn't going to be smooth. We've got to brace ourselves for that, but it starts tomorrow.
Mr. Leader, is legislation being considered to make law enforcement in charge of the security at our airports?
Well, we're considering a lot of legislative options regarding Social Security, or regarding security, Dan, and that's one of them. What can we do to beef up security in ways that will give us more confidence? I think we've now seen a tremendous threat to air travel in ways that we never anticipated. We've got to recognize that that will require actions that we never anticipated, and we're contemplating just what those actions should be.
Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle, thank you.
My pleasure.
You are watching continuing CBS News coverage of the attack on America. Now, the situation in Lower Manhattan at the moment is the death toll continues to rise, but slowly, because the rescue and recovery efforts are being so hampered. This is CBS News, ongoing coverage of the attack on America. Back now at CBS News World Headquarters.